In the early morning light, under the thatched roof of your hovel, you hear a cockerel crow for the dawn, and then a scream. A roar erupts from all sides as a horde of bearded men run towards you, axe raised high. And all you can do is fall to your knees and pray. The Vikings have arrived. Hi, my name is Shar, and this is the And Other Stories podcast, where we tell stories of the supernatural, criminal, and historical from folklore to fact. And today we're travelling back to Britain during the Viking Age, where no village was safe. And we're asking, what would happen to you if you were a peasant or you were a noble and the Vikings descended on your town? Would you survive? Let's take a look. The seafaring Scandinavian people known as the Vikings explored over half the globe, reaching as far as Canada and Iraq. They seized lands and crowns, settling wherever they journeyed, forever changing the population and political and social development of entire countries. Wherever they went, they raided and pillaged, traded and fought, even kidnapping for slaves and concubines. Rich and powerful Viking men had many wives and mistresses, and a well-known theory for their expansion across the globe was to find more women for their nobles and lords. Another theory is that the Vikings fought back with such force against Christianity, fleeing and fighting against the forced change of their religion from their Norse beliefs. Whatever the reasons were, it's clear the Vikings were determined and forceful, and any in their way would bend to their will, or be killed or captured, whatever their social status. So let's imagine you're a peasant. You have a small farm in the English countryside. You grow a little wheat and vegetables to take to market and sell. Your wife has given you a son. Harvest has been bountiful this year, and you have made enough to pay your taxes and to store food sufficient enough to make it through the winter. You're tired but content until the day the Vikings arrive. They pull into the bay a few miles away and you hear rumours of strange-looking longboats and men carrying axes, burning fields and houses, stealing goods from the people in the small village. They're sailing up the river, hopping out of their boat, quickly looting and loading the goods onto their boats. This is no mere raid for food. At Lindisfarne in 793, monks were cut down and holy relics stolen. At Jarrow, another monastery burned. At Iona, 68 monks were slaughtered in a single attack. If even holy men weren't spared, what chance do you have? And they are coming closer to you. You can't run with your wife and young son. You have a small arsenal of farm tools that could be used as weapons, but against a horde of Vikings with axes, you mostly have no chance. You hear them before you see them, raiding your stores to take all of your winter vegetables. You rush out to try to defend yourself, but they knock you down before you have a chance. Archaeological evidence at Repton shows peasants butchered and buried in mass graves, skulls cracked open, limbs hacked clean off. The last thing you see is the burning of your small thatched hovel and the screams of your wife and child as they are carried off by the Vikings to their longboat, to be sold in slave markets of Dublin or York, or kept as a concubine in a foreign land. Now let's imagine you're a noble. You have lands on the coast, which includes a small village and a scattering of small farms. A young farmer comes running to your hall, frantically telling you about the Viking invaders that have killed his livestock and kidnapped his wife. You have only a couple of armed men at your disposal, and you know that will not be enough. The ruling for these lands is that the Vikings are not to be traded with, but your options are trade or be raided. As the longboat advances up the river, the Vikings come across the monastery on your lands, stealing all the holy relics that are contained therein, caring nothing for their significance to you or the monks, or your people. They are considered heathens with their Norse religion. There is only one thing that you have at your advantage, that the peasants in the village and on their farms do not: money. Nobles often tried to pay the Vikings off, a practice so common it had a name: Danegeld. In 991, King Ethelred the Unready paid £10,000 of silver after the Battle of Malden just to stop the raids. You can pay for them to leave or move on, but there are no guarantees. Vikings sometimes took the bribe and returned the next year for more. In York, when they seized the city in 866, nobles were forced to submit or flee. But if you fall into their hands, some chronicles whisper of the Blood Eagle, a gruesome execution where lungs were pulled from the back as a sacrifice to Odin. Real or not, the fear was enough to terrify entire kingdoms into surrender. You can hide your wife and daughter, hoping that the Vikings just take the money and go, leaving your lands with whatever supplies are left over for winter. The peasants may starve from lack of food, but you, with your money and large home and servants, should survive. If only the Vikings will take the bribe. So there you have it. A peasant that can only hope to fight for his life with the meagre farm tools that he has, but will eventually lose his goods, his food, and most likely his wife and child. And the noble who has money at his disposal to try to convince the Vikings, luring them away from his home and hoping they will never come back. So tell me, if you were in a Viking raid, would you survive?